Well, last month, Air India Flight 171 crashed shortly after taking off en route to London. The disaster killed 260 people, including 241 of the 242 passengers, instantly becoming one of the worst aviation catastrophes in years. Investigations are still ongoing, but the latest data retrieved from the black boxes indicates it may not necessarily have been an accident. So what did happen? Well, commercial pilot and aviation commentator Steve Schneider has provided invaluable insights and expert analysis for millions of followers.
Last month's Air India Flight 171 crash killed 260 lives in seconds. Amidst huge speculation, expert Captain Steve Schneider reveals shocking cockpit fuel switch actions and possible pilot mental health issues that may have doomed the flight. Today, we uncover the explosive truth behind the disaster that's baffling the world.
Since the crash, and I'm pleased to say that Captain Steve joins me now. Steve, great to have you on Uncensored. Your commentary on this extraordinary story has been viewed many millions of times now. So I want to start, because there may be some people who've not seen the footage originally of the crash. I want to start by just showing what happened, and then I'm going to get into all the details with you. But just to start with, talk me through what we're looking at here.
So that's one of the two videos that surfaced initially. There's the second one of the airplane taking off. And what we can see here is that the airplane gains lift. It's got enough speed to gain flight. But shortly after that, something happens to cause a loss of lift over the wings. We now know, due to the preliminary report, that it was a dual engine failure. And that dual engine failure was due to fuel being cut off to the engines. And so with that being said, the whole flight was less than 60 seconds long. And now the preliminary report has told us, exactly how they lost fuel to both of those engines and then lost lift.
So explain the significance of this new revelation about both of the fuel things being off at the same time. What does that mean to a pilot of your experience? What does that mean?
So the fuel control switches are the things that everybody is talking about. And those are the two mechanisms. They're mechanical. They're spring-loaded. It's a three-step process. You pull it out, lift it up, and then you drop it over a detent, and the spring holds it in place. It's a very simple mechanism. Both engines have one. It opens up the fuel valves to the engine, and now the fuel, along with the spark, the engine will light off, and those turbine engines will continue to run until they're fuel-starved. I fuel-starve the engines on every flight. When I get to the gate and I set the parking brake, I instruct my co-pilot to take those fuel control switches from run. He pulls them up, drops them down, lowers them into place. It's a three-step process. Both of those, we fuel starve the engine, we shut down, and everybody gets off the airplane. So it's a very simple mechanism. It's not real complicated, but that's apparently, from the preliminary report, what happened. Both of those fuel control switches were placed to cut off.
Now, in all your time, have you heard of a passenger plane pilot?
It's jaw-dropping that such a critical mistake or deliberate act could happen at takeoff, a moment pilots are most alert. Steve's expert insight reveals this scenario defies all standard aviation protocols.
Doing that at that moment of takeoff?
No, I have never seen anything like this before. There's no known procedure that I know of where at 300 or 400 feet you would place both of those fuel control switches to cut off and then leave them there for 10 seconds before returning them back to the run position. According to the report, that's exactly what happened. They were placed one at a time into the cutoff position, a second apart from each other. That would be consistent with a one-handed operation. You can't reach over and grab both of them. It's got to be just one hand. So you do one and then you would do the other. The idea that maybe one of them somehow slipped out of the detent on its own is hard enough to believe, but both of them, it's not believable.
So the captain of the plane was a Captain Sub Arwal. Now, he was very experienced, and the cockpit voice recording has captured one pilot asking the other, why did he use the cutoff? To which the person replies he didn't. The recording doesn't clarify who said what. At the time of the takeoff, the co-pilot was flying the aircraft while the captain was monitoring. So specifically in relation to that, Captain Steve, what does that indicate to you?
Well, I think you have to look at how the question was phrased. You can see those fuel cutoff switches out of the corner of your eye. And so when pilots are rotating the aircraft off the ground, they're using almost exclusively their peripheral vision, right? Because as they pull the nose up, all they're going to see in front of them is sky. They have no reference. So out the side of your eyes, you're going to see the ground begin to lower, and that's a normal thing. At the same time, if somebody reaches over to grab those fuel control switches, that's going to be very unusual. That's not a normal thing. Your brain's going to register, like, what did I just see? If they had somehow just slipped out of the detent and down into cutoff, I think the question would have been more along the lines of what happened or why did that happen, not why did you do that? I think they saw something that explains that question to me a whole lot better than they just somehow slipped out of the position. I think they saw some movement over there connected with that. And it would make sense because they were done 1 second apart. And typically we start and we cut off the engines at the gate left to right, the number one engine to the number two. And in the report, they said the left engine was shut down first and then the right a second after it.
So there's something called the RAT, the Ram Air Turbine. Essentially, it's an emergency propeller. That was also deployed. And my understanding is that is also incredibly rare for that to happen on takeoff and so quickly. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, the RAT is an instrument of last resort. It's designed to give the pilot a little bit of electrical power, enough to shoot an approach and to talk on a radio, and enough hydraulic power to operate the aircraft so they can land it safely. It's connected always with a dual engine failure. I think on the 787, it also deploys if there's a total electrical failure or a total hydraulic failure. In this case now, we know it was the dual engine failure that caused the RAT to deploy. I've never seen one deploy that close to the ground. And one of the things that bothered me right from the beginning with this whole scenario was how quickly the RAT deployed. If an engine or both engines fail, typically it will take some time for them to fail, 30 seconds to 60 seconds for those big engines to spool down to the point where the RAT then would get the command to come out and give them that electrical and hydraulic pressure. It doesn't give them any thrust, by the way. It's designed to be at 35,000 feet. If you lost both engines, you could glide the airplane down and still fly it. At 400 feet, you just simply don't have the altitude. But that RAT looks like it deployed immediately, which would be consistent with both fuel control switches being set to cutoff. Part of the logic in the computer would instantaneously deploy that RAT. So that was a big question mark in my mind after the report came out that said both fuel control switches ended up in cutoff. That explained why the RAT came out so quickly.
So it would be an automatic computer-generated response.
The airplane was operating exactly the way it was designed to operate regarding the RAT, for sure.
Look, this was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. There have been a lot of issues with Boeing recently. From everything that you have now gleaned about this, including the initial reports, is it looking more and more like the plane functioned perfectly correctly and that therefore it was something done by the pilot or co-pilot?
Well, my take on it is the airplane was operating exactly the way it was designed. I don't think there was anything wrong with this particular aircraft. When you place both fuel cutoff switches to cutoff, that will fuel starve the engines and they'll both flame out. You'll stop getting thrust out of those engines. I understand the complexities with Boeing over the years, and I think they're two separate issues. I've heard 1,000 comments on my last couple of videos of people that they want desperately to blame this on Boeing, and I don't want to blame it on the pilots. I'm the last guy that wants to do that. Some things are plain and some things are clear. Whether it was intentional placing of the fuel control switches to cut off or unintentional, that's two different things. But I really firmly believe that there had to be a human hand on both of those for them to go to cutoff. I don't think Boeing has fault in this one. They might have fault in some other things in the past, but you can't confuse the two things and try to make it work so that, Boeing is to blame. I don't think they are.
So this then leads to the theory which is gathering most momentum, which is
This dark revelation about Captain Sabo adds a disturbing layer to the tragedy, fueling theories that the crash might have been intentional, linked to his emotional struggles.
not an accident, that some action by one of the pilots, and most attention has formed on the most experienced pilot, Captain Sabawal, that according to the Telegraph, he was the lead pilot because considering leaving the airline early to look after his elderly father. His mother had died, apparently, and he'd been quite depressed about that. Other reports in Indian media, I think, which were relayed also over here, had him, a neighbor of Captain Sabawal, saying the pilot told her just 1 or 2 more flights, then I'm going to be just with Papa. He apparently suffered from mental health issues and depression, had taken time off in the last few years following his mother's death. Now, just to be clear, we don't know whether any of that is relevant to what happened here, but it's certainly, if you were pursuing the theory of a murder-suicide, which is now gathering momentum, if you put together all this stuff about the captain, it's not massively far-fetched. And again, we don't know, but it's not massively far-fetched to see a sort of line here where the captain has had some kind of mental health episode and has deliberately shut these 2 fuel switches off. What do you think? Well, today's show is sponsored by American Financing. If you're feeling stretched by everyday expenses, groceries, gas, bills, you're not alone. Most Americans are putting these costs on credit cards, and many feel there's no way out. One option is to delay your mortgage payments and win some breathing room. Experts at American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off debt. Consultants are helping many homeowners to restructure their loans and consolidate dates, all with no upfront fees. Their customers are saving an average of $800 per month, which is like a $10,000 raise. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. So call them today before it's too late. 866-721-3300. That's 866-721-3300. Or visit americanfinancing.net/peers.
Well, I've heard those same reports as well. That is not my area of expertise. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not here to diagnose anybody after the fact. However, it is a very stressful job, piloting, and fatigue is a factor, and balancing your home life and being on the road and living out of a suitcase. Those of us in any profession that travel a whole lot, those things are difficult things to balance sometimes in our lives. You throw on top of it the stress and the responsibility and the trust that the general public places in us every day flying those big jets. They're complicated. All of that stuff, they're all factors, but I'm not the guy to weigh in and say, I know definitively one way or another. I do know that on my YouTube channel, we're starting a conversation now about mental health and emotional health with pilots. Regardless of whether that was the factor or the cause here, there's never a bad time to have that conversation. Right? Because the general public is sitting in the back of the airplane, trusting us that when we show up to work, we're ready to go fly an airplane. And that means emotionally and mentally. So I've worked something into my pre-flight brief that 34 years ago, I was flying with a student, and this student was a great student. But this one day we were flying together, he was totally off. And I just turned to him and I said, "Is everything okay?" And he looked at me and tears started coming down his face. I said, "I got the aircraft. I took it." I said, "Man, tell me what's going on." His dad had been up until 3 a.m. Trying to commit suicide. And this student had been on the phone talking his dad out of it.
Wow.
3 hours later, he's in an airplane trying to fly. That's not a time to go flying.
No.
So we took care of that. But I think the conversation now going forward with my fellow pilots is always, "Hey, how you doing?" And I ask them that sincerely. And if I get the, fine, I dig a little deeper. I go, "Everything okay at home? You ready to fly today?" And if I get a smile and a thumbs up, yeah, then we're great. Every once in a while, somebody says, "Are you serious about that question?" I say, "Yeah, I'm very serious about it." They go, "Well, I'm okay to go flying today, but if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind somebody to talk to." So that's an important conversation for pilots to be having with fellow pilots.
Yeah. The Indian Commercial Pilots Association, ICPA, said the crew acted in line with their training and responsibilities under challenging conditions, and the pilots shouldn't be vilified based on conjecture. To casually suggest pilot suicide without verified evidence is a gross violation of ethical reporting and a disservice to the dignity of the profession. And other people point to the fact that only 19 people on the ground were killed, which they say suggests the pilots had heroically diverted the plane, as they were lauded with doing for a while, to avoid residential population. If this was deliberate, goes the argument, then why would that happen? I guess the answer to that could be, well, the co-pilot.
Only a true insider like Steve can break down how unfathomable it is for experienced pilots to cause such a disaster accidentally, underscoring the rarity and mystery of this catastrophe.
Pilot might might have engineered that if he felt that the pilot had gone rogue and done something nefarious. In the end, Captain Steve, you put it all together. To me, I'm not an expert, you are, but to me it stretches credulity to think that a pilot of that experience, and the co-pilot was very experienced too, they'd had a lot of hours flying, that one of them would suddenly, for no explicable reason whatsoever, do something which would inevitably cause that plane to crash, unless it was a deliberate act. I mean, how could that happen accidentally? I mean, many passengers, I fly all the time. My immediate thought was, well, if it's not deliberate, how on earth can pilots just crash a plane like that by accident, just by flicking a switch?
Right. Well, the mathematics behind it is it's 2.5 billion to 1, a dual engine flameout right after takeoff in a 787. So anything we talk about with this incident falls into that category of 2.5 billion to 1. So everything just seems unbelievable. And even a pilot reaching over and cutting off the fuel control switches, whether it was intentional or a mistake.
The Air India Flight 171 crash remains one of aviation's most confounding tragedies, with expert analysis showing both fuel switches were deliberately or accidentally cut off, causing dual engine failure. Captain Steve Schneider's powerful testimony raises urgent questions about pilot mental health and cockpit actions during takeoff. Was it pilot error, mental breakdown, or something more sinister? Watch, decide, and join the conversation by subscribing to uncover the full story.